But thank you for joining me this afternoon. If you don't mind, would you briefly just introduce yourself and your role at Elon, and then we can get into the questions.
Sure. My name is Will Schreiber. I'm an associate professor of psychology. And my role at Elon is to teach in the psychology department and the neuroscience major.
Nice. Yes, I had you as a professor. It was a great class. Um, okay, so our first question is how frequently you use AI, and then what primary purposes do you use it for in your classroom?
Uh, I use it about every day. I actually use AI quite a bit. I don't use it that much in the classroom, interestingly, but I use it a lot in my workflow outside of the classroom. The reason is that in the classroom, I'm actually kind of a lower tech kind of person. I just sort of start my screen, and as you know, I just kind of move around the textbook. I'm going through the process of making PowerPoints, which is a big step for me. But I don't use it that much live in the classroom per se. What I use it for almost every single day is managing my workflow. It helps keep an optimized to-do list that is dynamic and helps give me recommendations on what to do for the work blocks that I have. And the other thing that I use it for a lot is providing feedback where I speak it and ChatGPT does a transcription of my speech, and that in and of itself is actually an enormously effective way of writing relative to just typing everything out because it's easier for me to speak things. And it also has more of a humanizing voice because when we tend to type things out, you lose some of the emotive context, you lose some of the things that you would have said if you were speaking. It all becomes much more concise and direct and professional, but sometimes you want to have an element of that humanizing component to it, and you can preserve that when you use AI transcription. Um, and then I can also use it, you can give it instructor prompts that'll sort of say like format this for being more formal if I'm writing to like the registrar, or, format this to remove any sort of emotional language if you want to be sure you're
Yeah.
writing it in a way that could be received. And it removes a lot of barriers um, to responding to people that would come from like that very metabolically expensive act of sitting down and saying, "Oh my God, I have to think here about how I'm going to write this email." And no, you just say what you're going to say, and then let the module kind of help you figure out how that should be received by your audience.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And then or by your experience, what are some of the more significant benefits or limitations that you've experienced?
Well, for me, in my experience, I have found that it really carries one benefit that has a lot of different sides to it. It makes it way more efficient for me to communicate. And that has these trickle down effects where I can respond to emails faster, I can get back to colleagues more quickly, I can more effortlessly shift tones between, say, speaking with vendors that I'm buying laboratory supplies from, to students, to co-authors. Like it removes this element of work that your brain has to do where it has to apply a filter or think about how to say something in a different way for every audience. Whereas AI actually can help manage that filtering task, and that makes you just more efficient, which makes you more rapid and more thorough in your communications. And so that efficiency has trickle down effects. Um, and, it allows me to, the incidental benefit of doing that is it allows me, ironically, to be more human. Because if I'm more efficient and I'm not spending as much time thinking about like, oh, what's the right word to say to this, high level institutional official, it's like AI is just like, hey, you should just say this, you know, generically bland word. It's like, oh, that makes sense, sure. Now I have more energy to actually like really focus in on a student email and to focus on that and be like, how can I help this person? How can I support this person? How can I say what's in my heart? And then, have a large language model filter it so that, I can communicate authentically, and do so in a way that's consistent with my values versus having to like put up these walls and just be this very filtered person. So it removes the efficiency and the time save allows me to be more of myself, which is really liberating. Um, the limitations, I mean, there's a lot of limitations. I try not to be cynical about it because, you could point at a lot of the well-known shortcomings, the fact that it hallucinates, the fact that it's iterative and that it trains upon its own data, the fact that in most cases it's just marginally more beneficial than a Google search. In fact, it's kind of difficult to do a Google search now without some AI trickling in some form or fashion. I don't think that those are unique challenges to AI though, because I think that, those are things that have been around since the internet became popular. So I don't consider those to be limitations in the sense that like, oh, this is a new problem that AI has introduced. I think that the challenge is that it has the appearance of being so fluent
Mhm.
that unless you know what you're talking about, it is extremely difficult to filter out
Mhm.
the viable information from the unviable information. So unlike, you can Google something and just instantly know like, oh, like this website is way above my pay grade. I've got no idea what this is talking about. But with AI, like it sort of sounds like something you can understand, which if it's not completely accurate, or if it's, coming from, who knows what source or a non-validated source, then it's way easier to believe it. And that means that you do have to burn some calories on doing your own research and verifying what you're doing, which you always have to do, but it's a little bit more difficult with AI because people don't feel naturally like they have to, just because everything reads so comfy and sure and secure. It's like, wow, you seem very confident in saying this thing. I mean, I myself wouldn't be so quick to to challenge it, but it really is a limitation that people do not um, do not typically find themselves leveraging the verification skills that they need to make effective use of it.
Yeah, so I'm hearing more like it helps you reevaluate priorities and correct me if this is wrong, but like where you can place like your energy and efforts, and then where it's important to be literate and like not so trusting all the time. If that.
See, what you just did is what AI would have done, which is take my blathering on and on and on and condense it into something succinct. That's right. Yes. It allows you to focus on things that are more validated and important and
Mhm.
meaningful and authentic to yourself. And then also the problem is it sounds so good that we don't typically even feel the need to check it, but we do just need to check it as much as anything else if it's something that's important. If you're like writing a message to your grandmother, it's like about the cookies she made or whatever, you don't have to like check that. But if it's actual scientific information, you can't take it at its word any more than you can trust, some random person that you're talking to.
Yeah, true. Well, then, kind of on that same note, how would you say that AI has changed your approach or your perception of teaching or learning or certain kind of leadership decisions?
Well, I think the thing that it has influenced most isn't really specific to teaching. I think it's something that's specific to anybody with expertise or anybody that has like a great familiarity with something. Um, Oftentimes we just think about things in the same way over and over and over and over and over again, right? You took my class. I've been teaching that class for 10 years. Like I think about that class and I think about the content in a very specific way. And that's not always necessarily a good thing because you can kind of just dig yourself into these trenches where it's very difficult to move beyond it or to think in new and unique ways. So one thing that I think that it's very good across a range of professional tasks is it can provide you with either problems or questions or perspectives that you yourself would have never considered. And in that sense, it's beneficial because, who cares if it's right or wrong? It's an outside perspective.
Mhm.
So I might say like, oh, here's an example for how to describe this. How does this sound? It's like, oh, it's clear in this ways. It's, unclear in these other ways. here's another way that you could describe it or that you might consider about describing it. And I can look at it and say, you know what, that is a perfect example because, I'm the expert and I know what it actually is. And so the example that you provided, I never would have thought of that, but now there's a better learning opportunity for students. Um, and I think that, that could also work in the context of learning, for example, right? If you're a student and you're writing and you ask AI for feedback, as I often see students do, it can point out like, oh, these paragraphs have similar themes. You should merge them. Or, oh, this grammar is incorrect. You might want to be more succinct. Or, it's not really possible to see your thesis statement here. So it allows for that outside perspective that you yourself are not naturally going to give when you just iterate and reiterate upon your own work. So I try to use it as a third party perspective that removes 10 years of teaching the same class from the equation and just is like, how could you look at this with fresh eyes? Um, and to the point about leadership decisions, it's also especially valuable for that. Leadership is its own thing, as I've come to learn. I have leadership in some on-campus stuff. I wouldn't consider myself to be an especially good leader, but that's just because I'm not really like drawn to those roles. So
Mhm.
oftentimes I kind of need to consult it with regards to like how can I outline a meeting or how can I, respond effectively and organize things. And, it'll usually consider things that I'm sure people that are experts on leadership do naturally or people that are good leaders do naturally. But for me, who, shies away from those sorts of things, you know, it teaches me about it teaches me in a harmless way about some of the things that I could consider doing or some of the things I might consider in the context of organizing people or staying on top of tasks that I never would have thought of. So it helps me in thinking about how to do stuff that is a little bit more outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, I think like the goal of the Elon's AI Center, because it's a relatively newer program, as is the use of AI in general, is more to help faculty, but mainly students, I would say, um, like learn how to be literate in AI, how to use it better, how to
Yeah,
use tools, and we help provide those or at least give guidance on where to find them. So I don't want it to be too redundant, but if you have any specific guidance for students, specifically, or other professionals, whether at AI or just teachers and professionals in general, who are beginning to use AI and are unfamiliar with it, maybe you have some tips for them to use it more effectively.
yeah, I've got two big ones,
Okay.
two very concrete ones, and the first one is actually super important. Um, and I'm going to like this should be front and center for everybody, literally everybody that is going to be using AI in a professional context, not figuratively everybody, literally everybody. Save your inputs and outputs
Mhm.
and operate on the assumption that you're going to need to reproduce them.
Mhm.
So one of the big standards that I came across as I researched AI for some of my professional work is that it is becoming, professional organizations are adapting to the presence of this technology. And as part of that, in the same way, if you're writing like a science paper, in the same way that you'd have to describe, how it is that you calibrated an instrument, you might have to say exactly what it is you put into an LLM and exactly what it is you got back out of an LLM. And for that reason, you always need to be positioning yourself to reproduce the inputs and the outputs, or else your entire project could go kaput. Like it could be completely voided if you used AI but you didn't document it because it's impossible to recreate and assign intellectual property.
Mhm.
So, with that in mind, you should always go into a task with that assumption because I think everybody engages with AI in different ways. Sometimes I've seen people use some language when they're talking to the AI that is they might not necessarily want to be reproduced in a public setting. It's like if I was talking to AI and I was like, AI, I've been feeling really down today. I don't feel any motivation to make my schedule. Can you really help me with getting started? Because I'm just not feeling it. Like, I wouldn't want to share that with the president of the American Psychological Association. But but if you came into the project, you're like, okay, everything, every conversation that I'm going in here, like it could be shared. Like, imagine it as being on the front page of a newspaper. That dramatically changes the way that you talk to it, and that then makes it so that it's something that can be reproducible. So always go into it under the assumption that you're going to have to reproduce it. And so jumping off of that, the second big point is to try to be thoughtful about where and when you use it. I know that it's tempting because it's such a good technology to just like ask it to do something because you think it'd be cool. Um, but what's becoming increasingly clear in the scientific world is that it is being viewed like a tool, like a statistics program. And in the same way that you wouldn't just run statistics, because you think it is cool, you have to have a plan, you have to organize around it. Think about where and when you would be using AI as part of a project and stick to that plan. And that also allows you to ensure that you are always using it in alliance with your own capacities and not as a substitute, because there's this temptation sometimes to like, you sometimes we use it and we're like, oh, that's a really cool idea. That's a really cool thing. But, that isn't really something that I originally was going to put into my project. And it's like, okay, well, did you go about this in a way that you could reproduce all the inputs and outputs? Did you go about this in a way that's structured? Like, how would you credit this? So like this sort of retroactive, going off into different directions, you can minimize that and be more efficient if you have a plan and you really intentionally think about it as being something that assists you in doing your professional work and isn't serving as a replacement for your professional work. Because that assistance but not substitution is really important for developing skills, as a student. And then also just staying on the right side of plagiarism, right? If you're copying and pasting outputs from AI, that's plagiarism. But if you're using it in a way to help structure your own thinking in your own brain, that's a completely different story. So that's what I would recommend. So save all your inputs and outputs and operate under the assumption that they would be published on the front page of the New York Times. That's what you have to operate under, and be thoughtful about it in the form that you're using it as an alliance with your brain, and that you have a plan for how it is you're going to use it, and that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, I feel like that's good advice. I feel like
Yeah,
I've also personally, yeah, I've
yeah.
also personally benefited. We've done a couple like prompt engineering kind of workshops, or even just like settings in voice and how to like interact with, you mentioned like large language models, so that'd be like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, those kinds of things. And I feel like I've even personally benefited, I mean, personally, but also as a student and in a professional setting, benefited from knowing how to talk to AI and
Mhm.
set up goals in order to get like an efficient output. But I agree because I've also had professors, even besides you, because I know you also asked for this, like request inputs and outputs, even if they say it's okay to use AI, that
Yeah,
that's like an important part of our
yeah.
submission process. So
Well,
I feel
yeah,
like
that's so it's interesting that you bring that up, Sarah, because it is strange, isn't it, how we have learned to talk to it.
Mhm. It is
And it's
weird
sort
because
of
it's very
like,
like nuanced too. It's not just like Google where you put in like a, like a normal search because you can
right,
kind of like converse with it. It's weird.
don't take this the wrong way. It's almost like it's a friend where you learn certain words that you can and cannot say to it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Obviously, it's not a friend. It's a mathematical model that's just reproducing
Mhm.
statistically the most likely thing, right? But you sort of learn like this is the way that I would talk to this thing. This is the way that I get the information. And we as humans, the good news is we've adapted to learn how to communicate differently with different entities. So we become, especially for young people that are growing up with this technology, like you're going to be able to use it so effectively, so much more effectively than, the old guard where it's kind of like an old dog learning new tricks. It just takes more iterations, more time. But I think for people that are growing up with it and are, sort of in this developmental period where they can learn deeply how to talk with it and how to get efficient responses and how to be mindful of the feedback, like it has really, really cool promise as a potential tool.
Yeah. And then I don't want to reiterate too much, but I know we mentioned like large language models and like ChatGPT. So my last kind of question to close this off is if you have any specific AI tools that you either use often or have had a really great experience with or had a really bad experience with maybe, and why.
Um, I have a question for you, which is, can you be specific about what you mean by tools? Because I don't really know what that means. Is that like, plugins like Scholar AI? Is it like Grammarly, or is it just like literally Gemini versus ChatGPT?
I mean, that's a good question. I think I personally mean like more of what like a chat GPT versus like a Gemini or something like that, more because
Okay,
it's
yeah,
on a beginner level of like like some people may not even know which or like the difference between them. Like I think
yeah,
Cloud is better for larger files versus chat is like more like you
yeah,
like kind of go back and forth and you know if
yeah, yeah. No, that's very helpful. I
but
mean,
if you don't have an answer, that's also okay.
I, I, I'm going to sound way older than I am. I kind of like it the way I don't really like to experiment with a whole bunch of new wacky technologies. I kind of like get into my rhythm, and
Mhm.
then once it's comfortable and safe, I just kind of continue to use it. So I guess I'm kind of old school in that I just use ChatGPT for a majority of my work-related tasks. I guess there's some compartmentalization because I do use Gemini as well, but that's like attached to my email.
Mhm.
So it's like I'll use that for personal stuff where it's like, oh, send me a reminder that I have to go pick up my groceries in like
Mhm.
2 hours or whatever. Like I'm not going to give that to ChatGPT. I'm going to give it to Google because Google's attached to, all my other workflow and it just like throw it in the calendar. Um, but what's been interesting for me, Sarah, is that I've kind of developed my own tools in a certain way.
Mhm.
I know that there's like modules you can download, but as I look at my AI project, I have it organized in a couple big sections. Like one of them is, my daily workflow with my to-do list and recommendations and scheduling.
Mhm.
One of them is, text to speech or, just like reading out things that I say, taking dictation and helping modify. One of them is organizing professional work. One of them is organizing my exercise schedule. It's like I've got all of these different tools, probably about, 6 to 8 different tools that one of them is like how to make good vegan soups. And I train them all independently. And so I just continue to reiterate upon those specific ones and use them. So the greatest impact is again probably the simplest one, just being able to speak and have it create words and create punctuation and just remove this big barrier for communication, which is the synthetic reproduction of what's in your mind on a keyboard, which
Yeah.
is very, 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 it's not very efficient. It's very cost intensive. We were not engineered by Mother Nature to type on keyboards and to think about things in terms of keystrokes. We were engineered to speak to one another. And if, insofar as it has allowed me to speak and thus communicate way more, it's been far and away the most impactful, I'd say, across the board. But I'd say that also, if you're clearly somebody that knows about this, you should give the day scheduler a try. Um, so the way that it works for me is I read out the meetings that I have, I read out the things that I want to do, and in about 3 minutes at the start of every single day, I've got my entire day locked out. Like how much time I'm going to work on every single thing down to the minute, when I'm going to take my breaks. And then I don't spend a minute thinking about it for the rest of the day. It's just I look at the schedule, and I just do exactly what it says. It's like work on this for this period, work on this for this period. And I've been absolutely shocked at how much more productive it's made me.
Mhm.
Because, sometimes you spend this time agonizing, like, oh, what do I have to do? Do I have to prioritize studying for this class? Do you have to study? It's like, no, just do this, and then do this, and then do this. And at the end of the day, instead of feeling like, oh, did I do enough? All you're thinking is like, holy crap, I worked for, 5 hours straight on things. And all of it was associated with the work that I had to do today. It completely changes the way that I've engaged with my day-to-day work. Um, so give the scheduler a try.
Very
It
well.
it
That
can
sounds
make you so
interesting.
much more efficient.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of, I mean, it goes pretty well with the overarching theme that I'm getting is just that it helps reevaluate like priorities and where you can put your efforts and that kind of stuff. And then like kind of helping alleviate some of that mental fatigue of just like not like the decision time, like between transitioning from one thing to the next, those kind of things.
Yes, yes. There are certain things that the brain is really good at, and there's certain things that the brain is not very good at.
Mhm.
And basically all this, you know, anything that is many, many, many steps removed from the conditions of our evolutionary history, like scheduling in Outlook or typing on a keyboard, or God forbid, typing on a phone, like you have to use portions of your brain to translate and to retranslate and to retranslate. And the more you can just kind of offload all of that extremely metabolically expensive cognitive load stuff
Mhm.
onto a data center, it just gives you so much more time to be human and to be accessible and to give energy, as you said, to prioritize things and to give energy where it belongs. And that's a very gratifying thing. As I said, it's allowed me to be more human than ever
Mhm.
because I can speak to so many more people authentically, versus having to just like churn out all these emails over and over again. That just,
Mhm.
anyway, I'm blathering on. You get the idea.
Yes. But thank you so much. I appreciate this. You were like one of the first professors I thought of because we're trying to like interview professors or faculty or even students who like we think are using AI efficiently. And I think you're also using it cautiously, if that makes sense. And I appreciate that. And I think you translate everything really well. Like it makes sense in how to use it in a daily way. So I
I'm
appreciate
glad to hear that. Yes, I'm glad to hear that. I really do think that it can be an outstanding tool to help improve lives. I know that a lot of people think the sky is falling, and in some ways it is, but I also think that it has incredible potential to shape us if it's used ethically. So I'm very glad to hear that you're seeing that.